All right, so thank you everybody for joining us today for our webinar, the title of which is the Modern Data Stack, Past, Present, and Future. My name is David. I have been in the technology space for about 20, 25 years, and I make big bets on technology, and the bets that I make on technology is inevitability. I have been with Knowi for over a year, and I think that some of the product directions, that we're going to discuss today are inevitable, not because I believe so, but because that's the input that I've been getting back from customers, prospect, clients, and industry individuals. I'm joined today by Jay. Jay, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure thing. Jay Gopalakrishnan, founder, CEO of Knowi. My background is in product and engineering and also leading data teams over the past decade plus over many different companies.
Okay, great. So, let's discuss what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing that we're going to do, let's take a look at the agenda, is we're going to kind of just give a brief, kind of introduction. Then after that, we're going to talk about the modern data stack, what it is, what are the different pieces, the different players, why is it so complex, which is going to lead us to how we got there, and what I mean by that is, what were the drivers, what were the inputs that, kind of made us have to create this alphabet soup of different companies and different technologies. That's going to obviously lead into what we call the summer of discontent, which is basically, if you take a look at, all the forums, if you go to the conferences today, people definitely have an opinion on what they kind of see in the marketplace. And then lastly, what does that then bode for the future? If people are discontented, what's driving, either consolidation or augmentation or new players to kind of step up on the stage. So let's take a look at, first of all, the modern data stack. So if you take a look at this, at this picture, we have really kind of dumbed this slide down. If we want to add every single player that's in the current modern data stack, this thing would be an eye chart. The piece would be so small you'd barely be able to see them. It's a hash of multi-billion-dollar companies. Jay, help us understand what are we seeing here today? What is the modern data stack?
So the modern data stack has many different components these days, right? It starts off on the extraction side of things, extraction or ingestion side of things. So the first step is take the raw data, plonk it somewhere. So transportation of that data into a data warehouse, for example. And within the extraction layer, you have many different companies playing in that field with billions of dollars in market cap, 5Tran, for example. And then they take this data, plonk it into a data warehouse, and then the data warehouse, you have many different options there these days. You got Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, Databricks, etc. And from that raw data in itself is oftentimes meaningless, right? So you got to be able to transform it, put it into a form that they're creating these data models that the business can use. And that's where the transformation layer comes into play. So DBT has been all the rage for the last couple of years, and you've got other open source products like Airflow and so on too, where you can take this raw data, transform it in a way that basically creating these data sets that it's accessible for a BI analyst and the BI side of the equation, and can also be used for predictive machine learning, creating your machine learning models. That could be a whole another set of solutions like Jupyter, R, etc., or Data Robot, and so on. And then you have your BI tools, the Tableaus of the world, the Lookers of the world, and so on, right? And we haven't even put many of the other components into this diagram because it makes it, more complicated. But you're talking about data governance solutions, you're talking about your cataloging solutions, you're talking about security and data operations, which is a whole hot topic at the moment. So that's essentially what the stack is today.
Yeah, and it's funny you should talk about data governance, because I'm taking a look at this diagram and I'm like, how do we even drive data governance, from top to bottom through this? But, that actually leads to, my next question, which is, where do you find all the people to manage the stack. I mean, you have to have experts in extraction tools, experts in data warehouse tools, experts in transformation tools. You know, an enterprise may be able to throw money at this thing, but if I'm a smaller, medium-sized business, there's no way. Is there a way that I would be able to find all the people to manage something like this?
So in the data circles, data contracts is a hot topic at the moment, but it's a problem that the stack itself was created just because you have different types of roles that along the way, right? So on the data side of things, on the this side, it's software engineers who go, okay, just grab me. I'm just going to plonk the data somewhere. You can do whatever you want with it, right? And then you have data engineers trying to figure out how do I get what I want out of this raw data for business use cases, essentially. And then they create these curated, data sets essentially for, then you have your BI analysts, then you have data scientists in this area, in this arena. And yes, you're absolutely right. Whole different set of roles with their own, objectives within that role. And then you're not just cobbling together different solutions, trying to make it all work together. It's also like cobbling together teams to make it all work together as well. So,
yeah. Wow. Okay. So, if this is kind of, the modern data stack, the next natural question then is, how did we get here? What kind of drove, this kind, what I call complexity by design?
Yeah, it's often helpful to look backwards to see how we got here, so we can see what the future looks like. Back in the early 2000s, data was much simpler, right? So you just connect your tableaus and the clicks of the world into your underlying data, get your visualizations and reporting. Bob's your uncle. A couple of things happened from 2006 onwards. So Amazon launched the AWS service. Cloud took off, and the amount of data that was generated took off. So you had high volume, high velocity, high variety data that also broke apart the existing data stack. So instead of having on-premise databases, you had the combinatorial explosion of your on-premise databases. You have your NoSQL databases like Elasticsearch for search, MongoDB, and Couchbase, and so on. You had cloud services where you had data stored, and so on, where there's lots of data all over the place, and that could be not in exactly structured form. So the shift then followed, where it says, okay, let's just grab the raw data. This is that whole concept of ELT, just extract it, load it into your cloud data warehouse, and then transform it later. And the landscape basically exploded with lots of tools trying to solve these point problems in that stack, essentially. And that's where things are at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I remember you sent me over an article a couple of weeks ago, and I think the article kind of, has led or is a product of kind of what we call the summer of discontent. Whether you're, taking a look at, forums or conferences, or, just going on Reddit, you kind of hear this underlying kind of bubbling up, that we've been seeing lately. What's driving, this discontent within the marketplace?
Yeah, so it's been a theme for a good chunk of the year, and there's this nagging feeling that the stack is not producing the results that was promised, right? So businesses are still clamoring for insights, but it takes too long. You got too many tools, too many people, too many processes in between to get to the data that the business needs to make their decisions, right? And because of that, it's not agile, it's not real time, because you have to do this entire process unless you have a whole real-time streaming framework, which is a whole different topic in itself. And what's also happened is all of these solutions are oftentimes consumption-based. So your costs have basically gone up exponentially. It's great for them, but from a business standpoint, it's you're paying for each row, or you paying for these compute costs on your data.
I saw one person had a great analogy, and they were talking about, this rent without equity, model where, I keep having to rent these additional pieces, but I get no equity out of them. They don't get me any closer to the solution. Or, Boris Evelston over at Forrester, sends out an article and he says, in the modern enterprise, 80% of the enterprise is relying on 20% of the staff, to give them data and insights. And it's like, I thought we were, in the age of data-driven culture. That was the big buzzword, last year. If 80% of the company is not being able to use the tools to get their answers, or if they have to wait months, I don't know if we're any closer, and so that naturally brings up the question of, then what is the future? What do you kind of see out there in the space, that kind of gives you hope to, where we're going?
Yeah, and then this is our version of the future. This is so what we expect the next couple of years is the theme would be unification and consolidation in many ways. So we expect things to consolidate around these larger vendors where they would, take Snowflake for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be logical for them to own that ingestion piece, right? Whether through acquisition or build it themselves. It would also be logical for them to own from where the data is to the business as well. So BI tools, data operations tool, etc. And it's in their interest to have all the business data that's stored by them, right? And same thing with Google, same thing with Databricks. And you look at Google, they bought Looker, and they acquired Looker a couple of years ago. Databricks is building their whole end-to-end stack. So it's the approach of you own the data into their system, and then you essentially locked in. We also expect for us, Knowi, we take a different approach, and we also expect other companies like Knowi to emerge in the future as well. And what we do is, hey, why bother moving the raw data into the underlying database, and then you're running the clock on transforms and all these other solutions in there? Leave the data where it's at. We'll give you this virtualized data set as a service that can grab what you need from the underlying data sources, right? And gives you an option to say, there could be either direct real time against the underlying source and the data comes in. It could be that results could be stored within Knowi. It could also be stored inside your data warehouse. So instead of moving the raw data and doing transforms and things, you're basically grabbing what you need and then basically acting on that. And you got this data set as a service that's trusted, reusable set of data models that the business can go to town on, right? So it simplifies that whole data engineering stack in a big way. But then on top of that, you have your BI layer, dashboards and visualizations. We've got search-based analytics, which is worked on for 4 or 5 years now, which is the ability to ask questions in plain English and get answers back. Game changer for business users, we think. You can do some machine learning models there, or hook up machine learning models from outside, alerts and so on, and also have this embedded too. So all of a sudden, it becomes not just simpler, reduces the cost, but you have full ownership of what the business case about from the data set standpoint, or all the way from where the data is to the business users.
Right. And I see a question came in, and obviously I'm a little bit biased. I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. When you take a look at, the previous slide where you had the different, kind of silos, how is Knowi, how is this future vision different? I mean, isn't, Snowflake, aren't they building, an augmented end-to-end, business solution or stack? Isn't Microsoft doing that? Isn't Google doing that? Why aren't we being served, by that consolidation?
Yeah, I think the logical thing would be, if you have data within Snowflake, right, and then it would be a logical place to go and do the end-to-end, right? So the slight bit of challenge there is that you got to have this node data in Snowflake, right? And it makes sometimes, like, we have customers that have petabyte scale data on the raw side. It makes no sense to move that over, right? We're just working with a customer earlier in the week, and they have 40 different instances of Elasticsearch, for example, right? And it makes no sense to take that and plonk it into a warehouse of sorts. So in those cases, it would be like query Elastic, then join that data with something in your data warehouse. You get a virtualized data set, right? And then what do you want to do with that data set? You want to have that real time? You want to store it within Knowi? You want to chuck it into Snowflake or Redshift, and then, ask questions against it.
It's funny how, there's almost become a normalization of waiting, for data. I hear from people and they said, well, if I have a question, it's normal to wait weeks or maybe even a month or so, before I can be able to take a look at that visualization of that data. And the other normalization that I'm finding are people who are like, well, I have a tool for being able to visualize, but I don't know where the data is, within my organization. I have to call IT, I have to wait, Are we really seeing consolidation, or are we seeing, it looks more like partnering, like they're just creating a series of partners under one stack. When you take a look at, kind of the way in which, organizations like Knowi are doing it, what's going to be the biggest benefit when you take a look at it? Will it be speed? Is it going to be simplicity? Is it going to be data governance? Where are the real accelerators or returns on investment that people can expect if they kind of move to this future?
Yeah, I mean, today it's all about cobbling together things, and
Right.
they're not designed to essentially work together, you could argue. So you're kind of making them all work together and then putting the teams in place, the people in place to make it all hum, right? So in the future, we expect a lot less friction. So even with this consolidated framework within these products, and also a lot of these startups that raise lots of money would get, would get bought out, I assume, right? So as part of this consolidation wave. So it's so expect in either stack, the stack on the left and also things like Knowi, it would get easier. It would just be a question of what is the modality that the customer would prefer. Would they want to do actually the ingestion and into a different stack, into a centralized stack, or leave the data in a distributed form? So
Okay, and then
we know where we've lied, we made our bets. So
gotcha. And then one last question I see here is, what's in it for the data scientists or the BI professional? How does their world get more complex? Does their world get easier? What do you see for them, in the future?
Yeah, from a BI analyst and business analyst standpoint, what they're looking for really is a set of data models that are consistent, that they can use, right, for the business to answer the questions that they want. What they struggle with often is like, where's the data? How do I put this together? Well, what do I need to do to get to that stage? So once you have that data model, set of data models that are configured or set, then they can reuse those data models, right? And they can commonly asked questions are there already. And if data is not present, then create a data model with that associated data in it. So that whole challenge today with that modern data stack is it's a lot harder than it needs to be because of how it's done today. But with what we do and what we expect the future to be with these other systems, it's a lot easier.
Okay, great.
Those.
Well, I think that, we are kind of at the end of our webinar today. We want to thank everybody for joining us. We're actually going to make the webinar available offline for, consumption later on. And obviously, we would hope that you would share it. If you have any questions regarding what you saw today, or if you want to know more about Knowi, feel free to contact either myself, David at knowi.com, or Jay at knowi.com. And we thank and appreciate all of you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.